Okay, hello, welcome to another episode of Wordspace Radio. Today I'm joined in the studio by the very talented Hannah Stone.
Thank you very much, it's lovely to be here.
How's it going, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I've been teaching all morning, so this is a nice refreshing change.
Oh, good stuff. Hopefully be a nice break.
Yeah.
Also joined by Wordspace regulars Ethan Lowe.
Hello.
And Megan Wood.
Hi.
Is that time too painfully formal there?
It was very formal, but we're all about formalities on Wordspace Radio, apparently.
Professional.
Awesome. Watch the professionality just kind of like nosedive.
Plummet.
That's the plan. Okay. I don't know. Do you want to just dive right in and tell us like who you are as a writer and what you kind of like wanted to bring today?
Yeah, well, I've got a completely split identity really, because I sort of came out as Hannah Stone about 2 years ago when I started doing the MA in creative writing here. And like lots of people, I wrote all sorts of, angst-ridden crap when I was a teenager, and then didn't really write anything while I was bringing up my kids and getting established in a career. And then when my baby went back to university, I thought, hey, it's time for me. So I chose my mother's maiden name as my writing name so I could distinguish it from my academic publications, and that's Hannah Stone. So that's how I came to be Hannah Stone.
That'll explain why I was trying to email you the other day. I put h.stone at Leeds Trinity
right.
at first, and it was like, you can't recognise this.
I know, it's a bit
hold on.
weird, because I do have, my other life is Hannah Hunt as an academic, and I've been teaching creative writing this morning as Hannah Hunt, but those of them who came to Wordspace saw me as Hannah Stone, so they're probably even more confused than they were. But it's a bit of my life I'm really enjoying actually, and it's certainly the bit that's taking off and developing, so I'm really, really happy to be Hannah Stone.
When did you start teaching creative writing here? Because I think we
about 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, my main subject area, theology, is beginning to sort of die on the vine, and I found that quite depressing. And also, I just so love writing poetry. And having worked really closely with Amina and Oz and Martin on the MA, they said, "Oh well, why didn't you do some teaching of it?"
I was going to say I was a bit confused just then when you were mentioning it, because I could have sworn you worked in the philosophy and theology department.
Yes,
because
I do.
My housemates have been lectured by you. And
oh, scary. Yeah, well, I've been doing that for about 10 or 12 years, and I also work for the Open University where I teach English. So I've got degrees across all those different disciplines. But the way I differentiate it is, you might understand this, Megan, is that when I'm being Hannah Hunt, I wear quite sort of formal clothes and I behave in a slightly more conventional manner. And when I'm being Hannah Stone, I put all my sort of bohemian, slightly more poetic type of things, and that gets me in the zone, and it just reminds me that I'm doing all the lovely creative stuff today.
But no, so do you feel that like your work as Hannah Stone is completely separate to your thoughts and feelings as Hannah Hunt, or is that kind of...
Oh no, because Hannah Hunt's been around a very long time, and she's experienced all this sort of she's experienced all the sort of the broken heart stuff and the bringing up kids, and the experiences are mine. I would just say that Hannah Stone is my voice, my creative voice, whereas Hannah Hunt, and I've published a lot as Hannah Hunt, is the academic one, and there are these two threads to my personality. And some things, there's one poem in particular, or one set of poems that I did in a collaboration with Oz Hardwick, where my academic church historian stuff actually is commissioned to appear in poetry. And that was a really great opportunity. That it wasn't anything to do with the MA, it was just something that came out of our discussions. It was a project he'd had in mind for a long time. It's called New Crops from Old Fields, 8 Medievalist Poets. And Oz Hardwick, the mighty Oz, who is also a tutor here, also has two names because he's known as Paul Hardwick when he's teaching, but he's Oz when he's being a poet. And he invited me to get involved in that. So I had to use my church history knowledge and put it into poetic form, and I actually, that's been published by Stairwell Books.
That's brilliant.
So that was something which actually really brought together the two different bits of my life very nicely.
That is cool.
I remember seeing you a lot at Wordspace, because we've been regulars.
Hardcore fans.
Yes,
And it's always a good night out. So first Wednesday of every month.
Yes, first Wednesday of every month.
Yeah.
Medusa Wine Bar, Town Street, Horsforth.
Yeah.
It's really, honestly, I go to loads of spoken word events, and it is undoubtedly the best one in the area.
100%.
Nice one. That's the best plug we've had so far.
No, it is seriously, partly because it's got so many young people in it. I go to an awful lot of events that are just full of boring old farts like me, and you just, you don't want to be mixing with loads of older people, exclusively older people, and it's just really, it's such a vibrant atmosphere.
Yeah, it's cool because I've been to a few open mics that are they try to tailor it more to the young people and everything. Like there was one called Cosmic Slop for a while, and then there was Dead Poets for a bit down in Headingley and everything. But they always just descend into like they're really, really madly enthusiastic for 2 weeks, and then everyone gets high and goes home. Like, so it's good that at Wordspace have managed to actually get a varied age group of people that actually come back every single time.
And there's a sort of bit of a steer from the creative writing staff at Trinity, so they set it up and keep the momentum going and invite the guests and do the flyers and things. So I think that helps, but it's a very, very egalitarian space, so come on down and do your stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think this is like it's organically fallen into a place now where we can maybe hear a poem from you if you're ready.
I think that would be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Awesome.
I'm going to read you one that I very often start with because it's very short and it's quite light, and there's a little joke. It's probably a rather tired joke if you've heard it before, about I was crap at maths at school, and this is a poem about maths, but it's also a poem about writing poetry. Algebra. If a 53-year-old woman who lives halfway up a hill leaves her house at 9 a.m. to teach a 10:30 class and walks 3 miles through 4 inches of fresh snow and half a mile on 2 inches of slush, which contains 15% compacted ice, and stops twice to listen to birdsong, how many calories does she burn, and what colour is the sky? You should show your workings out. Now, I don't know if they're doing algebra in schools anymore, but it was one of the things I was very bad at when I was at school.
I don't think I've related to a poem more than that one in my entire life.
Excellent.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Everyone's heard it, like the student complaining, when am I ever going to need this in my life? Oh,
exactly.
You will need it one day.
I know.
I'm yet to need it.
No.
I'm yet to encounter a math problem that I've not managed to solve with a calculator.
I'll let you into a secret. I'm so old. They didn't have calculators when I was at school. So there we are. As I said, my kids are now at university. So and they're actually the source of quite a lot of my writing. And whenever I read, I always promise I will read a poem about each of them. Not that they actually give a rat's arse about what I do with my poetry, but I do always read one poem about each of them.
That's cool. That's sweet, though.
Yeah.
As long as they appreciate it. Like, if it was me, if my mum wrote poetry and she said she was going to read stuff about me, I'd be mortified.
Oh, it depends what she'd write, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't be anything good.
This one is about actually about when I took my son down to look at a university, and he was a sort of grumpy 16, 17-year-old. And shall I read you this one? It's got a rude word in it, so you might need to put your fingers.
I've got
in
an
your
immature
ears.
sense of humour, that's fine.
Well, you have to try and work out where he is, actually. So this is Banbury. So it's next stop Oxford, but he's pissed because his fucking expensive headphones are all crapped up. All those paper rounds for nothing. And can he have a loan of mine to listen to an episode of South Park? Digging crossly at a much-picked spot. I pass them over, but want to warn him there'll be a homeopathic residue of the Dichterliebe, or maybe a Bach cantata, which might interfere with reception. He's asked me about this subsequently, and it was just one of those tiny little moments. And I find often that you'll get like the germ or a seed of a poem just from a tiny little incident, and then it will just sort of, something will happen in your head and you'll think, oh yeah, that's a poem. And sometimes things like that almost like start off, I think, oh, well, that'd make a good Facebook posting, and then I think, actually, I'm not going to waste it on a Facebook posting, I'm going to call it a poem.
That's funny that I can actually relate to that. I've thought of a joke that I've thought would make a tweet or something, and you save it in your notes on your phone and it turns into a poem 4 months
Excellent.
later. It's weird that, isn't it?
Why don't we hear you read more at Wordspace?
I'm frightened and shy.
Are you?
Shouldn't
you don't
be.
know. You shouldn't be. You know how friendly it is.
Yeah, no, I just bully other people into reading.
Oh, do you?
And
Oh,
then
okay.
I got so good at bullying other people into reading that I even started a show where I could drag people in off the street and then force them to read in front of me whilst
Excellent.
contributing none of my own work myself. It's
Oh,
great.
No, I
Living
want
the
to hear
dream.
this. Don't you think, Ethan?
Yeah,
we should
definitely.
put pressure
Well,
on him to-
us three can bully Billy right now.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
heard it here. Next Wordspace.
He's
Yes.
reading.
Billy's reading out.
Definitely. Well, in fact, I'll put your name on the list with
Yeah.
the mighty Lewis King, who is our compare beyond compare. And
That's the second time he's been mentioned in the past
Yeah,
couple of
he's-
weeks,
he's
actually.
getting
so
there.
he's getting some,
he's a
getting
very
some
special
attention.
boy, very special boy.
We moved away from your poem quite quickly there, though, because that was a brilliant one. I
Oh,
didn't
did you
mean
like it?
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to change the conversation or anything, because it was really, really cool. I like how focusing on such a small, seemingly insignificant moment in poetry.
Yeah.
That's always,
And there's some things there that are not necessarily clear to people. And when I've been writing poems and they've been workshopped, I said, well, do I need to explain? You might know what homeopathy is. You possibly, unless you like classical music, wouldn't know what a Bach cantata or a Dichterliebe was. And actually, I can now say the editor of my solo collection says, no, leave people guessing, because they can always look things up if they don't know.
Yeah.
But you've got the general sense probably that I've been listening to my old fogey type music on my headphones, and he wants to borrow them for something totally different. And
Yeah.
I sort of feel there'll be like a residue of me in that when I hand the headphones over to him. And it starts sort of in his voice, really, that this is, I would never use language like that, because I'm a middle-aged woman, but and I'm afraid even now he is at university, this is still the sort of language he uses, it's
Yeah.
most shocking.
It was clear there was like two distinct voices.
Yes.
I really liked,
Yeah.
because me and Billy have both been teenage boys. I think.
yeah, Ethan, I have. Weird that.
Sounds quite likely, yeah.
Yeah. So you definitely get that. I didn't use as bad language, but
No. I have said to him, you really shouldn't speak to your mother like that, but I've lost that battle. But as a parent, you have to choose your battles, I think. You have to
Yeah.
think that one is, they both stayed in school, they both got their qualifications,
Yeah.
they both, I kept them vaguely on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, totally.
It
As
does
long as they're
say-
not doing drugs or
No, no,
starting
no.
fights, you can
No.
pretty much forgive them
No,
for swearing
I-
like a sailor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
you get your relationship with him as well through it. Like it's the poem's quite playful as well with how
Yeah.
obviously it starts off in his voice, and I feel like, well, to me it says there's a good relationship between you. So
That's a really insightful comment, because my two sons are totally different, and I've got a very different relationship with each of them.
yeah,
And I think that absolutely epitomises how I am with Sim, and it is quite frank, and it's very sort of warm and direct,
Yeah.
and what you see is what you get, and you sometimes get a little bit more than you've bargained for.
Yeah.
With my other son, he's a bit more quieter. It's a bit more private. It's a bit harder to know what's going on in his head, really. And in fact, I really started this sort of current wave of poetry with the poem about him I wrote that I thought I'd bring this afternoon, which I wrote 5 years ago, which would be not long after he started. He was he trained as a doctor, so he's had a very long period at university, and it was really very much him actually going away from home that began to give me the headspace to start writing. And I really bless my children for having left home. And it was when Sim went to university that I started doing the MA. So I think the other poem, which I might like to read now, actually, is sort of about Adam, my older son. And it was one of the first poems I wrote when I started thinking, I used to write poetry as a teenager. Why don't I do it now? And this again, I think, hopefully you will all actually resonate. Would you go home in the holidays to your mums and dads, or
If I get the
whatever?
chance, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, do they not always let you out?
Stuck here because of work, innit, But,
Yeah. Well, shall I read this one? It's called Vacation.
Go for it.
Being merely human, it isn't the empty nest that rubbles my bosom, but the denuded fridge. For 2 decades I nourished you. First, the blind ignorance of a dividing cell that sought to split my body. Then, month after month of your voracious mouth, sucking my goodness. The downy sphere of your butting head cradled like a third breast against my eager heart. Now, hungry for knowledge which I can neither give nor share. You feed yourself mysteriously on books and screens and caffeine shots, a lean Columbus returning with new fruits, your discourse reshaped with clever acronyms, sustained by continents of discovery and expensive taste in biscuits. Last night, as I drifted towards sleep, I heard your lovely footfall descending through the darkened house, the squeal of the fridge door, and the unmuffled clatter of cutlery.
Wow, that one was cool.
That's your term of approbation, is it? Cool.
With you mentioning like the different relationship you have with your sons, like even if you hadn't have mentioned that beforehand, you do kind of see this as more not secretive, but not
mysterious.
Mysterious.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, the first one I think is playful, and this one I would say is. I mean, it is quite tender because I did sort of feel it. It was his lovely footfall because it was lovely to hear him around the house, and because of course he'd been keeping completely different hours to me. You know, I'd be in bed and I'd hear these people moving around the house, going downstairs, and obviously getting food. And it was like a bit of a secret life going on, and something not furtive exactly, but this sort of whole other life, and the sense that because he's a medic and I had very little scientific background, really what he was doing at university was a complete mystery to me, and the more so because it was all expressed in acronyms. So as he said, well, I'm doing BTT today, and then I'm going to DFS. I haven't a bloody clue what that means, and he'd sometimes say, I've left my notes in a folder, it's a pink folder and it's labelled whatever it is, and eventually, by the end of the 6 years, I learnt what these things meant. So I was trying to express that sense of him, that I had nourished him originally, firstly by growing him inside me and then by breastfeeding him, and now he's nourishing himself on all this other knowledge, and that's kind of, as a mother, what you want to do. You want your children to be nourished by the world and to grow in all sorts of ways, but there comes that point when you have to let go and you're not doing the feeding
I imagine
anymore.
you feel kind of left out in a funny way, like you want to be because you want, but it's kind of...
but it's liberating as well, so
there was one line that to me stood out and kind of said that the most, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something about caffeine shots. It wasn't a line, and it was a few, like, feed yourself mysteriously on books and screens and caffeine shots, and I really liked how it felt simultaneously kind of like proud but also kind of concerned and judgmental at the same time.
A little bit anxious about all the caffeine,
Yeah, and I think that's how all mums are about university. They're so pleased that you're there and so happy that you're achieving things, but secretly just a little bit like, I wonder, is he eating enough? Has he washed his underwear once since he got there?
Absolutely.
I can relate to it so much. Like, I feel like that's my mum's relationship almost. I feel like I need to go and ring her in a minute because I know it's just because I got work this summer as well, so I was in Leeds most of the time. I did get back to see him, but like she always loves me being home. And it's just, I think that captures most university like experiences, like from a mother's perspective, and because I can see where it's coming from. I can imagine my mum feeling the same way, like, it's good that he's gone, but I do kind of miss him a bit.
I feel like that's a great one for any mum who can't actually articulate how they feel, because some people aren't really blessed with the gift of a creative side to the personality, and maybe can't properly say how they feel about the son being gone and being taught things that they can't understand. And I feel, not to insult my mum particularly, but she doesn't excel in the creative side of life, and I think she'd really relate to that, because it's words that she wouldn't know how to say herself.
Plus, I suppose it's like, I don't know, like, me and my sister are both off at uni, and my mum's on her own in the house, and I know how much she likes having me home, and I know it's she doesn't want to tell me because she thinks it'll stop me from doing what I'm doing, and I feel like she shouldn't do that because she's silly.
Oh, that's funny that my parents begged me to come home.
I felt, and I feel this with my own students, that as a parent you kind of handicap your children if you make your need for them to be around the dominant thing, because yes, I'm on my own too. It's just me and my two cats now, and you know, I knew I might just end up feeling redundant, which is why I started doing the MA when the younger one went to university. So I didn't just feel like a redundant mother, you know, oh, my job's done now, what am I going to do? And I do love them being home, but I also love them going back, because then the house is clean and quiet and tidy again. Yeah, I mean, I thought this would resonate this afternoon because, yeah, it is about students, but it's also about mothers, and it's about growing up, and it's about the fact that boys just never stop eating.
The line about expensive biscuits made me laugh so much. The countless times when Mum said, well, you can afford expensive biscuits, but you can't afford to, like, come home. It's one of her arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what is a life without expensive biscuits?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's the one thing I've learned in university is the value of biscuits.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Can we have another one?
Yeah. What would you like next? I mentioned that. Oh, I know what I was going to say about that is if you liked it and you think your mum would like it, then go buy a copy of An After Dinner Sleep, edited by Oz Hardwick and published by Indigo Dreams. We set up, in fact, I set it up originally, an imprint for the creative writing programme at Leeds Trinity, which was taken on by Indigo Dreams, and they publish 3 books a year out of the creative writing programme, and that was the first one they published. I did it with Jill Lambert and Maria Stevenson, and it was originally a show for the Ilkley Literature Festival Fringe last year, and all the poems were written from the perspective of women who, in Shakespeare's terms, had nor age nor youth, but as it were an after-dinner sleep dreaming of both. So it's about being middle-aged. So that was that. But a very different thing I think I'm going to read you is something that came out of being commissioned, a bit like the one I did for Oz, but which I might read later, something I would never ever have thought of writing. So I said I was rubbish at maths. I did very little science as well at school, partly because I was moved up a year and so skipped everything, and also because English literature was set against chemistry, so that was a no-brainer. And history was set against physics, so that for me was another no-brainer, which only left biology. So I was very intrigued when I was invited to contribute a poem written about an element on the periodic table. And they're coming out very soon, actually. They're being launched next month in a volume called My Dear Watson. Can you guess why it's called My Dear Watson?
Sherlock
As in
Holmes
Elementary, My Dear
Watson.
Watson.
Elementary. Brilliant.
With an organisation called Publishing House's Beautiful Dragons. And I chose to write about one I'd never heard of, partly because I wanted to reference Ruth, who's a character in the Bible I like, and also the abbreviation on the periodic table for this is Rue. So listen out in the last stanza for some references to a rue or two. That's a little enticement for you to listen right the way through to the end. So this poem is written in the voice of the element, who turns out to be some sort of goddess, possibly. Ruthenium. I am hard, but wily. For aeons I resisted attempts to locate me. Like most gods, I was always there, but could not be seen. My powers are greater than at first appear. My full virtue is only tested by synergy. Those who seek diligently have always found me. Even accidental discoveries provide enlightenment to the credulous, or should I say faithful, servants of scientia, masquerading as knowledge. Non-belief is such a Johnny-come-lately. Who can fall for that old myth? Men adapt divinities to meet their own limitations. Some need the material dimension of incarnation. I offer shape-changing, which they term transitional. My half-life is stable, that's reassuring. For those who hanker for a Trinitarian model, I permit functionality as an alloying agent. The least smidgen of my durability multiplies strength. Frankly, titanium needs all the help it can get. I condescended to manifest myself to several chemists, jumped on the colonial bandwagon, so the Polish-Lithuanian eureka moment was a one-off, and it took a Russian to pin me down on the table. I burnt his fingers, scorched his tongue, but give him credit, he persevered. I'd like to claim that women played a part in all this, but only an ardent feminist would find a plausible connection between the Latin for the superpower and the sad-hearted foraging exile, and no self-respecting scientist wants to be associated with a fictional Joey. Once they've exhausted the language of words, men will proclaim my perfection in numbers.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a heavy metal or not, actually. It's related to platinum. So, any scientists here? Are you familiar with your periodic tables?
I thought really I was, but I've never heard of...
No, I think it's quite an old one. I don't think it's one of these new ones. So it was fun because I actually had to research a bit about it, and some of the terms there I've taken from the sort of the language of science,
yes,
like
I noticed a lot of them, things like half-life.
Yes,
Thought that was quite cool. I imagine that, like, if there's a lot that's in, if you know a lot about the element itself, the whole poem feels more...
Yeah, if I showed this to either of my sons who'd done a lot more science than me, they'd probably understand this better than a lot of the stuff I write. But I realised there were also theological things coming in there, and that just sort of happened. So the Trinitarian model, there's a lot of sort of funny church history jokes in there, really, which are a bit obscure. I stressed a lot about this poem because I was really, really thrilled to be given the commission. And then I thought, what the fuck do I write? You know, how do I get into this? I couldn't break into it. And my eureka moment, I go down to West Wales, to Pembrokeshire, to write poetry. I go and stay in a little cottage on the coastal path for a week every April. And I sat up in bed one morning and thought, I know what I'm going to write. And I just sat and wrote it. And I was really pleased because I've been trying for about 2 months to do it and absolutely nothing was happening. So that was quite satisfying.
Sometimes that's the best way, isn't it? Like, if it just comes to you, you just gotta get it all out straight away.
Yeah.
That's how I usually write. Like, I like just sitting down. If an idea comes, just sort of letting myself type and just, you know, run away with it.
Sort of free write.
Yeah, and then just edit at the end if it's anything that I enjoy.
And I thought, if you've been thinking about something for a while, then quite often I think there's been a lot of sort of work going on behind the scenes, in the back of your mind, before you actually start putting something down on paper.
And as the idea grows, you kind of accidentally gain an interest in things that would help it out. And
that's right.
You know, it's like they say the first step to learning to play the piano is to talk an awful lot about playing the piano.
Oh, right, okay.
Because eventually you're going to accidentally stumble upon somebody who might have a piano.
Yes.
Who overhears the conversation.
Yes.
And, you know, it all goes from there. And I think sometimes that's the same with creativity. If you keep something in the back of your head, you kind of accidentally stumble across things a little bit more frequently.
Yes, I think so. And I think I'm trying to inculcate this in my students, I think my creative writing students, that you just, there's nothing that is wasted, no experience that you can't harvest something out of. So, you know, go around with a mental or physical notebook, and the least funny little thing that happens or thing that catches your attention might or might not turn into something. But if you're not noticing it, if you're not observant, poets, I think, have to be observant people. You're watching, you're looking at what's going on, you're picking up all sorts of things, you're reading between the lines. And, you know, it sounds a bit like you're a spy or something, but I think there is that sort of element of just watching what's going on and not knowing necessarily where it's going to end up or what's going to happen with it.
Yeah, I don't really write poetry. I almost said speciality, but I'm not specialised in it. But I like writing prose, more like comedy scripts. Well, not necessarily scripts, but I usually I've got a notepad in my phone, and it's just, if I hear like a funny sentence that someone said on the train, it's like I can incorporate that into one of my writing pieces somehow, because that was a stupid thing you just said.
I think that comedy takes the exact same type of observation, though, like just utilised in a different way. You know, it's I don't think that in that respect, comedy and poetry are far removed. You know?
Absolutely, because what makes you laugh is the fact that you can recognise what they've observed, and if it was totally sort of otherworldly or out, unreal, it might be funny in a different way, but what makes you laugh, you think, oh yeah, that I've seen that, but they've just found the right words to put that down.
Absolutely. I mean, observational comedy is the natural type of comedy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of says it all, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was working on a poem for Wordspace, actually, because I don't really read much poetry out there, just because I went to Tenerife in the summer recently with my girlfriend, and as soon as we got there, we were waiting for the coach to get to the hotel, and it was one of the most bizarre things I've ever overheard. And this woman almost got hit by a bus. She was stood in the middle of the road, not where you stand, and so the woman beeped at her and was like, "Could you move, please?" And she stepped out of the way, and then she just turned to her friend and was like, "Bloody foreigners!" And I was like, "You're in the foreign country," and I was just like amazed. And the things you hear British people saying abroad, I just feel like incorporating something like that into a poem would be hilarious.
I remember you telling me you were writing that a while ago. Actually, I've been excited to hear it.
Look forward to hearing that. I heard someone, it was a list of stupid things somebody had overheard in a Spanish restaurant or something. It was like, none of the waiters here speak English, and the food's very Spanish. Why is all the food foreign? They don't have anything English on the menu.
But just the fact that she said bloody foreigners, just is. They're at home.
This is their country.
It's also that sort of mild racism that is actually quite endemic in society, isn't it? It's a bit of a throwaway comment, but actually underneath that is the instinctive response is to criticise someone who's other than you, who's different to you.
Yeah, even if you're the silly bugger that's walked out into the road. Yeah. No, I don't know how you didn't go up and talk to her, to be honest, mate.
I was holding it in. It was a long flight. It was.
So how's that poem going then?
I've not come back to it in a while because starting uni again, we've got loads of different creative writing pieces we need to do. But it's about, I got first draft done. Yeah. But whether I take it to Wordspace soon or not, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll read with Billy next time.
We'll figure something out.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, actually, this one that you've just read, Amina is also doing.
She is, and Oz, and Jill Lambert as well.
And I'm supposing perhaps is Becky Cherryman, because
I'm
at
sure
the Writers' Festival, she had everybody in the class do one of these, and I did one. Well, and it was awful.
What did you write on?
I couldn't choose an actual one, and I'm a big comic book fan, so I just did Kryptonite, and I did a poem about Superman.
Oh, right.
And then she tried to get me to read it, and I was like, I can't, because I ignored it and didn't do the actual thing properly, so sorry.
Well, perhaps we should have a mini Leeds launch of it, because we've got a launch in Manchester at the end of November, and I don't mind flogging across the Pennines for it in a good cause, but... maybe we could get some of the Leeds. Perhaps we could get some of the Leeds people to read in Leeds.
Amina was talking about hers to me and Ethan the other day, and she seemed really excited about it. She seemed like she was finding it a little bit of a difficult one to do for the same reason as you. She said there was a lot of research, but she seemed proper buzzing about it.
It is. It was really fun to do, and it was quite. I mean, as with a lot of poetry things, it was all disseminated on Facebook, so there were lots of messages bouncing around. There's a sort of Facebook group, for all the whatties, she calls them, the poet who's convened it, and I sort of kind of feel I've virtually met a few other poets. So I think it'd be fun to bring it to Leeds as well, and they're all going to be totally different poems.
Yeah, even if you've chosen the same element.
Well, everyone's got a different element.
Oh, that's good.
She made sure that we all write on different elements, but we will all be doing different things. The previous one was called Heavenly Bodies, and it was constellations. And Oz and Amina were both in that as well.
That one sounds cool. That one sounds a little bit easier to get something out of as well.
I think so.
Still an entertaining idea, but a little bit less of a brain,
a little less challenging, because I guess in constellations you've got often an obvious narrative,
natural myth attributed to almost all of them.
And some poetry can be narrative. I think this is something I'll be exploring with my students, that poetry doesn't just have to be some sort of airy fairy or skipping around with the daisies type, but it can actually tell a story, can't it? And even quite a short poem can tell a story. So people who feel more comfortable with prose could perhaps think of it as, you know, a story that they're putting into a poetic form.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because sometimes people tend to prefer prose because they feel like they've got better ideas than writing skill, if that makes sense. And the idea, I've noticed it, their idea for a thing is cooler and their skill to write it fancifully isn't so much, so they put it in prose because that's the best form for it.
Though I would say prose writing requires a great deal of skill.
Well, of course,
it
does. I'm not just meaning it.
We more normally write in prose, I suppose, don't we?
But I think they're doing it as a misconception. That's what I'm saying. I think they perceive prose to be the better way to get a good idea for a plot type of thing out, and it isn't necessarily. Sometimes it works better in poetry.
Yeah, you've made me think now whether I've got any poems about which have got some plot in. I have, actually. Would you like a poem that's got a bit of a plot?
Yeah, go for it. I've never seen anyone as prepared as you, by the way.
Really? Oh dear. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's a good thing. It's cool.
We'll hand out our fake awards as most prepared guest.
Well, no, I just sort of... Yeah, I mean, I was sitting there actually in the foyer just sort of going through various things and thinking how I would, how I might pull things together, not knowing how it would go, and it's really good fun. I'm really enjoying it. This is very, very light-hearted, and this actually reveals my my little weakness. I work from home a lot because I work half-time pretty well for the Open University, and most of that work is done from home. So I do sometimes watch a bit of telly while I'm having my lunch. It's a shameful admission. And I love detective stories. This is about that, really. And I'm sure you won't have actually seen this advert, so you won't necessarily know what it's about, but I'm sure you can imagine. You snooze, you lose, Colin. I loathe this woman who's paid by a chain of leisure hotels to interrupt my viewing, punctuating with her chummy bullying the narrative of my chosen detective drama. Its splashy Cornish scenery and gritty characters. I hate her bright and breezy manner, the way she pushes to the front of every cupcake queue, haranguing her shadowy mate without dimming her kilowatt smile. Frankly, I'd rather the static nylon sheets and dripping shower of the cruddiest B&B than a night in the hotel she advertises. Imagine going down to breakfast in yesterday's walking kit, which passed the sniff test, and finding her at the buffet, fresh and tangy as the fruit platter, rolling her over-painted eyes at waiters chosen for exotic but unthreatening ethnicity. I'd lurk at the back of the pack with Colin the loser, dragging our heels behind her Jimmy shoes. We'd pile too many sausages on our plates and plunge the coffee clumsily, a fountain of granules caffeinating the cloth. With luck, he'll wake one morning and find she was just a bad dream. Better still, he'll stir, peer over the edge of the king-size moraine of pallid sheets, and discover her lifeless body splattered on the shag pile, and find a heavy, blunt object clasped in his sleepy hand.
Awesome. I didn't expect the ending.
No.
That took a turn.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So how did that idea come about?
Well, the particular detective drama is something called Wycliffe, which is set in Cornwall, and it's only about an hour long, but it's on one of these channels where you have a sort of commercial break about every 10 or 15 minutes, which really annoys me. And there's, I don't know what, I think it might be, am I allowed to use a brand name?
Yeah.
Right, I think it's Warner Leisure Hotels, and they're this sort of very bossy woman who's, you never actually see her husband, but she's always sort of talking over her shoulder, come on Colin, if you're up, are you up for this? And you can imagine him just getting more and more resentful. So I just sort of fantasised in the context of a murder inquiry that this invisible character who's not actually part of the advertisement would actually, be like the worm who turned and eventually beat her to death. So it started with me being really annoyed with this sort of, this woman coming and, sort of saying, you must come and spend lovely weekends at my, these hotels. And ended up actually sort of getting into the scenario and imagining that I was in the hotel with this, Colin the loser, I've called him. Because
I love that though. That's absolutely ace. Like just the way that your imagination's gone and ran away with itself.
Yeah.
Completely. Like just from, I'm a little bit annoyed at this weird bint on the annoying adverts
Yeah.
has, gone all the way to fantasizing a murder mystery with a character that wasn't even actually in the advert that ticked you off in the first place.
Yeah.
It's amazing how sometimes you can daydream into such weird things. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I really think that's cool.
Oh, thank you. It's just a lot of fun doing it, and I think when people feel poetry has to say something serious or be meaningful, there's all sorts of layers of meaning. I'm involved in some poetry events that are terribly sort of politically correct, and if you're not writing about how miserable your granny was when she worked in the mill, then you don't feel like you belong there. And I've written a poem about that, which I haven't brought with me actually, but I have to write from where I am, and I'm an overeducated middle-class southern woman, so get over it. I've still got a sense of humour. So you kind of, work with what happens to you, and then just sort of see where it goes, really. And I don't see why poetry can't be a lot of fun and irreverent, as well as having some really, really serious things to say.
It's cool for you to say that, because we've said similar things. Me and you say that all the time.
Yeah, I love light-hearted, not that was nonsense, but stuff that's just funny and isn't afraid I don't want to say this just in case.
And the thing is, we both have a fondness for highbrow fiction, and we both have a taste for kind of daft, just for the fun of it. And I think that I remember Martin saying when we interviewed him, the idea of highbrow and lowbrow just damages literature.
Yeah.
And it's silly because it's all just good stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think hopefully a good writer will have some versatility. And when I think of I've read a huge amount of fiction, and I teach a course on the 19th century novel for the Open University. And you take a blockbuster 19th century novel like Middlemarch, which is absolutely one of my core texts of my life, and it has got some very serious things to say, and there are moments in it that make me cry every time I read it. But it's also very funny observation of humanity, and she's got a very compassionate way of looking at people. So, she's a big person. She's not. She's got breadth and depth, and that's what I would aspire to be as a writer. I think somebody who can engage with all aspects of life and not edit out the funny or even the bits that aren't very satisfactory, or the bits that don't go so well. So all my love poetry is disappointed love poetry, because I'm absolutely rubbish at relationships. So
I can relate to that. Don't
but you're young yet. Without exception, the poems I've written about men, I think almost every single one of them is it didn't work out. But you can write about that in all sorts of different ways, and it doesn't just have to be woe is me. You can do a take on that as well. So highbrow, lowbrow, I think people often think because of my accent I'm just going to be highbrow, and actually I can be very crude.
That's the best way to be.
Yeah.
Bit of both.
I could give you a really heavy poem though if you want to read. Do you want a contrast to that?
Yeah. You read whatever you like. We're just happy to hear it.
I'm going to read you one that I wrote. I wrote last year. As an academic, I sometimes get to go to conferences in interesting places, and that year I went to Moscow and to Jerusalem, and that was fun. This year I went to Milton Keynes, which was not so much fun. But when I was in Jerusalem the summer of last year, I was going to say the latest, but sadly it is now the previous issues with Gaza were just kicking off, and the 3 young teenage boys who've been captured and whose bodies hadn't yet been found, that was all just happening. And I went to a conference held in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem about prayer and worship in the early church, and I was mixing with Jewish people, with Christian people, and I had just a few minutes to walk around the old city of Jerusalem. And I guess I'd now identify myself as a sort of post-Christian or cultural Christian, because I teach a lot of that stuff, but I don't always feel comfortable with it now. And I wanted to capture a seminal moment of standing in the centre of the old city of Jerusalem as the Islamic call to prayer was being proclaimed from by the Muezzin, and I was standing on Golgotha outside the Holy Sepulchre Church. I thought, this is the intersection of Christianity, Judaism and Islam at a point when all of this is just kicking off yet again, and God knows, well yes, literally God knows where it will end. This is one of the poems that was commissioned for Oz's collection of medievalist poets, New Crops, I mentioned earlier. And the reason I want to read it now is that not only does it, as I've said earlier, pull together my academic life and my poetry life, but I chose a poetic form which I'd never written before, a sestina, which is a medieval troubadour form. It's absolutely rock hard. And it kind of works. The way it works is that you only have 6 rhyme words at the end of the lines. It's not even a rhyme pattern, you just have the 6 words and you have to repeat them. And the last word at the end of the 6th line of the first stanza becomes the last word at the end of the first line of the second stanza, and so on. So it sort of rolls over. And then in the last little tercet, you have to get all 6 words in.
That sounds painful.
Well,
impressive.
Yeah. It's one of these poems that really does need footnotes. So, I mean, I'll just sort of say, well, by way of background, that apart from the names of the young boys who were ultimately discovered killed, there are biblical names in there, and 3 different names for God: the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic name for God, and that's what I'm trying to capture. So that's that. The other bit of context is that it references a poem by Milton called Samson Agonistes, and that's where I got the title from, and that was just sort of rolling around in my mind when I was trying to write this poem, which took about 6 months. So it starts with a little quotation from Eyeless in Gaza, which is also the title of the poem. So the quotation: "Ask for this great deliverer now, and find him eyeless in Gaza, at the mill with slaves." The Via Dolorosa puts its shutters up. Boys swarm down the steps in the waning light. Heat sinks back into the earth. Not far away, gunmen prepare to fire, adding human debris to the ruins. Take them, earth, for cherishing. Take these young men and cherish them. Eyal, Naphtali, Gilead, just boys in the wrong place, growing to the light. Now their bodies rest on bare earth. Rachel weeps for her children, grief fires her heart, the future now a ruin. Noble even as a ruin, each body brought for cherishing. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, holy boys whose faith when tested sent light shining over this blooded earth. Sure of God, they strode into the fire. Hananiah, Azariah, Misael seized the fire, seized the hatred, scorched it, ruined it. Allah, Jehovah, take and cherish them. Prayer is better than sleep, boys, brothers, calls them Muezzin, as light seeps from heaven back into red earth. Gaza's murdered fall on baked earth, their lost names merge as flames in the firing that renders a homeland a ruin. Foraging on beaches, or cherishing their pigeons on the roof, girls' and boys' lives hemorrhage at the speed of light. At dusk we hail the gladdening light, call down peace on everyone's earth. Whichever God you serve, he's not in the fire of earthquake, but a still voice crouched in the ruined city, huddled in arms that cherish the broken limbs of a nation's boys. Great deliverer, this earth you cast from light is ruined by man with shell fire. Hold back your boys, let them show cherishing.
Wow.
Very impressive.
I realise that's actually not the most up-to-date draft version, but anyway, you can see how it's a dark poem.
It's quite a turn.
Understand all the, and I thought, well, it makes a contrast with the previous poem, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's a big tonal shift, but
very relevant.
Yeah, sadly, very, very relevant.
Unfortunately.
And I do write increasingly stuff from news items or things I've seen in the newspaper. I wouldn't call myself a political figure because I'm very, very poor at remembering what's happening and keeping up to date with it. But when something grabs my attention and I feel there's something I want to say about it, then it sort of kind of speaks to me.
It's important that people do that though, because the negative horrible things that happen in the world are a big part of shaping culture, and
Yeah.
a big part of culture is the art that comes out of it.
Absolutely.
And even if it's hard art to look at and read
Yeah.
because it, you know, touches a nerve or two, that doesn't matter. You have
Yeah.
to, you know, so, you know, poets who write about the more difficult things are quite valuable,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, the romantic poet Shelley said poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. And I think that's just a brilliant phrase.
I like that.
It just sort of says, you know, we can't change the world's rules, but actually, you know, anybody who's got, a journalist, a poet, a painter, anybody who can create meaning out of things and express feelings and talk to people, communicate with people, they kind of have a responsibility to the world around them, I think, and they can, you know, express that through their art. And I would say that poetry is comparable to other art forms in that way, that, you know, other forms of art can have that effect as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
That poem's a brilliant one, but it's definitely one that I feel like I'm going to need to read 2 or 3 more times to
Yeah,
get to
yeah,
completely.
it's not an easy one, and sometimes when I've read it, there's just been a sort of a gasp at the end, and I've not been entirely sure if it was a good gasp or a bad gasp, but one of my friends said it makes her cry every time she hears it.
It was sad, very, very heavy, like we were saying.
It's hard to know how to respond when someone does a really, really sad poem as well, because part of you wants to be enthusiastic and like, dude, that was absolutely flipping brilliant,
Yes,
congratulations,
yeah.
but then on the other hand, you don't want to like get up and clap because
Yes.
everyone's dead and it's all awful,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think that's something you sense when you're performing poetry, you know, at Wordspace or anywhere else, that that you get a real sense of how the audience are responding. And although probably as a poet you decide, if you're reading a set of poems for a certain length of time, you decide what you're going to read and why you're sequencing them that way and what sort of links you're going to do. You will, I think, hopefully respond to the audience as well and think, you know, I'm not going to read that one actually, I'm going to skip to that or do something different. So I'm careful how I use that one because it's not right for every audience.
Yeah.
And if I include it, usually in a longer set of poems, I make sure that it's sort of cushioned by something a little bit more, you know, a little bit more accessible.
it's funny that we had Pauline Kirk on, and she said something very similar. She said that she'd always read her heavier stuff in between 2 jokier ones.
Oh, right, okay. It's like when we're giving feedback on essays, it's a sandwich approach.
Yeah.
You say something nice, then you say the hard bit, and then you say something nice again.
That's it.
Did you know that? Have you noticed some of your essay feedback?
Oh, no, a compliment sandwich, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's
that
right.
used to be how my dad tried to tell people off.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but he just ended up like saying something nice in a really insulting and condescending way.
Oh, yeah.
It's all fun.
Yeah.
But I think that's good to have been read out on a podcast format as well, because listeners at home, if they didn't get it first time around, just rewind it back and
Yes.
and we'll put all the links.
Yeah, excellent. Well,
to all your books. And
yeah, that would be
obviously
really good.
People can
And
research it.
you know, call out for Oz, who's you know, a fantastic poet and a very talented musician and all sorts of other things. But also, he is such a generous poet because he really genuinely loves what he does and he wants other people to do it. And so if he finds an opportunity for you to put a poem in for a competition, do something like this with him, he's always showing you where those opportunities are. And I appreciate that so much about my writing colleagues here, that's been brilliant. And I'd hope, you know, in time, if I carry on teaching creative writing, that I'll be able to do that for my students, because I think that's a really valuable thing to do.
I'm sure you will, because it's something you'll pick up from him and everyone else around. So there's a Oz-themed podcast coming out in a few weeks,
Excellent.
by the way, so that's a thing.
He's just brilliant. Yeah, we're all totally in awe of him.
Yeah, the whole English stuff are brilliant here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't want to leave so much. I'm doing the masters next year.
Excellent.
But part time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
I'm doing the
creative
masters
writing
too.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
We're both
excellent
sticking around. I don't want to leave this place.
Yeah, that's like the only. I was thinking about it the other night. Like, am I staying for the right reason? Because I don't think I'm staying for like the best academic reasons or anything. I just don't want. I'm just not ready yet. I like Trinity a lot, and I want to stay and do it. And
well, I would say the MA creative writing a very, very good reason for staying.
Yeah.
And doing it part time is definitely the best way. I would say the best way to do it, because you can, you know, earn some money and do other stuff as well.
It'd be nice to live up here as well.
Yeah, and it's not difficult to fit in. You know, it's really not difficult to fit it in.
I feel like we've already built up those relationships with like Martin and Oz.
Yes.
And, over the 3 years, because we know them quite well, because obviously going Wordspace and everything like
I'm
that.
just kind of terrified at the idea of, like, if I don't do the masters and I stop being in university, maybe I won't write as much. And I like that. I've not had a day where I've not written something for, like, since I started this
that's
course.
Really good. Yeah.
And it's accidental. It's because you're just kind of like constantly surrounded by people who are so much better at writing than you that you feel awful, and it's fantastic, you know. And I want to stay here and have that for a bit longer.
I think writing is, you know, it is a community-based thing, and you know, but if you find a spoken word event wherever you go to work in the future, that becomes a little community, or set one up yourself, or do something like this, which is brilliant. And then you have the impetus. You might not be writing every day, but you might think, oh, I do want to have something fresh to take to that spoken word event. So, you know, and look at me. I mean, I wrote a lot when I was a teenager. I wrote virtually nothing in my 20s and 30s, and then it all started again in my early 50s. You know, so it is never too late to pick it up, and it keeps you young. You see, you didn't think I was 56, did you? So, so there
Definitely not.
Write poetry. It keeps you young. Keeps the wrinkles away.
That's a secret.
Fantastic stuff. How are we for time? What are you thinking?
Shall I end with just one very little lighter-hearted one? Do you think?
Yeah, that's becoming a trend, actually. People do tend to do that, so that'd be nice. Let's do that.
Well, I hope it's I think it's a lighter-hearted one. And in fact, this is, you know, I said I had to go at 4. This is why I have to go at 4. Because I'm going for a massage. And it's a very therapeutic thing. I get a lot of muscular and mental tension, and this is really good. So
it's not the place in Horsforth, is it? Because my aunt works there.
No, it's not. No. It's near where I live in Chapel Allerton, and I've been going there for ages. So again, this is another. Well, I'll tell you a little bit of background to this. I've been doing, as a sort of relaxation technique, a wonderful thing called mindfulness, which you might have heard of. And it's all about trying to live in the present and just experience and accept things as they are, and not try and change
thing,
them.
Isn't it? It
is related to Buddhism. Focusing on your breath. And I was sort of, when I'm having a massage, I'm just totally there in the room, just there, and I try and just not let anything else, you know, into the room. But this was actually somewhere I went with a friend to stay in a hotel where they threw in a massage as part of the deal. So it wasn't my normal masseurs, and it's really about that I don't know quite where this massage is going, but it's really relaxing. So this is my final offering, and thank you very much for having me. This is Spa Break. A figure skater in soft slippers, she sketches shapes on my spine, her work marked by the tracery she leaves. Warmed fingers find knots, pop them like bubble wrap. She poises a fingertip on the summit of my shoulder blade. Her tunic rustles as she reaches for more oil. Then both thumbs glide in a long crossed chassé to the edge of the towel. And because she is a stranger to me, my body cannot anticipate the next twizzle, or where her palm will come to rest, nor how far she will venture to pummel the contours stretched on her table. Surfacing, my senses collect themselves as she cradles one forearm, shakes tension into limpness. Now, knuckles knead the heel of my hand, joints click in sympathy with the heating. Wind and hail clatter no nonsense against the window pane. She pivots, runs her hands from nape to coccyx, skims a flattering hourglass on my back, bends to whisper into my abandoned hair, tells me she's done.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
For having me.
Yeah, it's been absolutely awesome. I'd love to have you on again.
Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure. Good luck with your future.
Yeah, thank you. You've got anything to plug before you go? Do you want to give a reminder?
Oh, well, not only New Crops from Old Fields and After Dinner Sleep, but my first solo collection, which is coming out with Stairwell Books in York in April next year, and it's called Lodestone, and that is currently with Rose Drew, and I'm just sourcing images now for the book cover. So
great.
Yeah, that's
I'll
great.
have to have you back on before the release.
Thank you
if
very
want to
much.
come back on with the
Yeah, brilliant.
Lodestone.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks
Awesome.
so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.